Welcome to Jared Scott Outdoors, your source in the field for local outdoor news. This week on Jared Scott Outdoors, we're heading after kokanee salmon. Now it's the end of August, and so the kokanee are in full spawn mode right now. And so I grabbed Rylee. He starts school tomorrow, and so this is kind of a let's go out for a few hours and see if we can catch some kokanee salmon on the fly rod. I've never done this before. I've heard about it. I've wanted to do it for years, and so finally we're going to get out here and do it. We're fishing for some of the kokanee that come out of Palisades Reservoir. Let's get after it. As mentioned, we were fishing the kokanee salmon that come from the Palisades Reservoir. Most of these spawn up Big Elk Creek, so that's where we were headed. I have never fished for these kokanee during the spawn. I've heard about it. I've heard it's pretty tough because they're not eating. You know, they're spawning, and so you're not gonna get them to take the fly like you can classically. More of a just get in their face, get in their way, and make them get aggressive. We'll see. So anyways, kind of a new experience for both Rylee and I. We will see what happens. Now the spawn gets going pretty hard the last few weeks of August and into September a bit. So you have to time it right to get in on the action. Unfortunately, by the time you see this, the spawn will be pretty well wrapped up. But if this looks fun, keep this in mind for next fall. Any lake that has kokanee will very likely have some sort of similar situation in which you can fish for those spawning salmon this time of year. Finding a good spot to access the river, we figured we were plenty far up and decided it was time to quit hiking and start fishing. It was kind of funny how at first we didn't see anything, but then we spotted a spawner across the river from us, then another up ahead, then one right in front of us. They just started materializing all over. We actually spent a few minutes just watching them before we shook ourselves out of the trance we were in and started fishing. Now again, as the fish are focused on spawning, they don't eat. So the purpose of putting a fly up in front of them is not for food, but rather you're just trying to aggravate them and annoy them until they strike at the fly out of aggression. That's the goal. But not having done this before, I wasn't sure how easy or tough this was going to be. I was trying a weighted egg pattern to start off and found that almost instantly I got a bite. But it was just a native cutthroat that no doubt filled its belly on kokanee eggs this time of year. Getting it back in the water, I was back to stalking kokanee. Just from observing, I noticed a few things. What I saw is that there are some fish that are on the move. They move upriver across from hole to hole and often dart back downstream for a bit. These aren't the ones to target. The ones to target are those that are staying put, and often these are in pairs. These are no doubt on a red. Every now and then they swim off a little, but very quickly return to the same spot. Pay attention to these spots, as it's likely a red, which is the spot of small gravel where they actually deposit their eggs, and a spot to be careful of. Rylee! It was a pair of fish that I casted to when I hooked my first kokanee of the day. I fought the fish for a bit, all the while trying to get Rylee's attention so he could grab the camera from me. However, he couldn't hear me over the sound of the water, and so I just kept trying to work it towards me. I was surprised at how strong and big these were. There was definitely no horsing the kokanee to me. Okay, it is hard to film and bring in a fish by yourself. I finally got Rylee's attention so he can come grab the camera, and then I can bring this fish in, but they're big fish. Looks like it took my egg pattern. Such a big fish. Holy cow. What made matters worse was it wasn't until now that I realized I had forgotten my net. In small water with smaller fish, you can get away without having a net. But with bigger fish and faster moving water, you really need a net. And I was reminded of this the hard way as I struggled to get this nice kokanee into me. That is awesome, I'll tell you what. So I've got a Prince nymph, dropper, and then a big old egg pattern, fuzzball egg pattern. Oh, it's going down though. This is too big to bring in. Ah, lost it. Shoot! It was in too big a current down there. Had a couple of them out there in front of me, just kind of swimming together. So I just kept casting in front of them, and saw it kind of dart over, and sure enough, it was on. So you just got to annoy them, but I was hoping to get that in my hand and get a picture of them. That was awesome. I learned on this trip that part of the fun isn't just in the catching of the fish, but even just watching them. Because they're so easy to see, it's quite interesting to just sit back and watch them. It really is amazing to see how easily they navigate the current, especially in the faster sections you would think would be difficult to swim in. Slipping back out to move upstream a little, we were once again reminded about how thick it was with vegetation on this river. Not only does it make it tough to fish, but it makes it tough to just hike from hole to hole. But because we didn't want to disturb the fish too much, we bushwhacked through the brush as much as possible. I tried to help Rylee along a bit and waited for him to catch one before my desire to fish got the best of me, and I headed on up a little further.
This would be so much easier if you weren't worrying about their reds. Then we could just walk right up the river. We're wet wading it. That's the fun thing about summertime fall fishing. You can wet wade, but all it means is we get in a little bit right where we drop in, find some rocks to get on, and then go back to climbing through the trees to kind of go around the reds and get back into another spot. There's a really big rock over here. Just gotta climb through some stuff and see if I can find another spot, but this is pretty fun.
Once on the rock, it did give me a great vantage point to see several spawners. However, just because you can see them and they're nearby doesn't mean much. What you really have to find are fish that are in a good spot so that you can easily cast to them over and over and have time for your fly to get down to the fish. The ones I found to be the best to target are those that you can get below and that aren't in a fast section of water. And of course, those that are staying put in one spot. That being said, once again I was able to hook up on another great fighting kokanee. And once again I had the same problem as before. I was by myself and I had no net. However, this time with a little work and Rylee's eventual help, I was able to coax this kokanee into some calmer water and get a hold of it.
Alright, check that thing out. Isn't that pretty? Oh. Man, they're so big, they're hard to get in. Anyhow, just a gorgeous kokanee salmon. Now their teeth are big, gnarly old hump on there, and it's just amazing the transformation they take from those shiny silver fish to this swimming up the river. There he goes. He's a little slow moving. Oh, he's gone now. I think I wore him out just trying to get him in because he covered so much ground. It was kind of difficult to stay on the edge and get down river and get him in, but that was neat. So what I did is I switched. The fly that I caught, the one on before, was a weighted fly, so it was getting down deep. I don't have any more of those. And so I noticed my flies were staying above them, my egg patterns. And so I switched to a weighted woolly bugger, because if the idea is not that they're eating it, the idea is you're just annoying them. I thought, instead of an egg pattern, I'll just stick an ugly woolly bugger that gets down and can annoy them as you cast it in front of them. And so I switched, and I don't think it was, I don't know, 10 casts, and I had that one. So we'll probably switch Rylee over to that and see if that's a little more productive for us. Just getting something ugly that annoys them.
So now I went back to trying to help Rylee get on one. I helped him as much as I could for a time before finally moving upriver a bit and casting my own in. Sure enough, with time, patience, and probably a lot of luck, I hooked into a few more. However, after a bit of a fight and having no net, I lost him. So now it was back to focusing on Rylee. I watched as he was getting the hang of how to annoy the fish by casting over and over the fish, and of course, after I turned the camera off, he hooked up on his first kokanee of the day.
Finally got one.
This is when a net would have made landing this fish so easy.
Whoa. Why didn't we bring a net?
So I finally got hooked on one, and we were about to get it in, but we forgot our net, so it was super hard, and it started running downstream to the faster stuff, and it's really hard to run downstream and not get in all the reds and stuff. So it's really hard to get them in when they get down there, but if we had a net, we would have had it.
My next catch was right under Riley's nose. As with all the others caught so far, the question was, could I land it?
Well, had another one and lost it for lack of not having a net and trying to hold the camera in one hand and pull it in with the other. But these are some fighting fish, I'll tell you what. So as you can see, I have a new fishing partner right now because it's a new day. So with Riley, we had a great time. Riley had a tough time actually getting him, and because I didn't have a net, we weren't able to get his on. So we're back out. It's about a week or maybe 10 days later. I brought 2 nets so we could both have one. I'm not gonna make that mistake twice. I've got Jim here. Now Jim has been a longtime friend of mine, and you might recognize him from Miricle Ear. He's been sponsoring the show for a long time. So Jim has never done this. He's kind of like me. This is the first year I've done this. So let's take Jim down to the water and see if he can catch some of these beautiful fish. It was now nearing the end of the spawning season, so I wasn't surprised when we found several already dead kokanee laying in the river. This is a stark reminder of what happens to all these beautiful kokanee salmon as a consequence to their having come upriver to spawn. Every one of these fish will eventually die. They only live 3 to 4 years and then head on upriver to spawn, thus keeping their genetics alive. And then they fall to the harsh reality of what that means. As another fisherman once told me, it's sad to see such beautiful fish die. Something I would completely agree with. Even though there were dead kokanee in the river, there were still plenty swimming around. It's been several years since Jim has had a chance to fly fish, so it did take him a bit to get the hang of flipping his fly out in front of the kokanee he was targeting. But I was actually surprised how quickly he hooked up with his first one. So I got him. He's biting. There we go! Yeah!
I'll tell you what, a net made landing these fish so much easier.
Sweet. So we're out here kokanee, catching some kokanee salmon, and well, they're interesting. It's been fun.
Compared to when Riley and I were fishing, the fish had changed quite a bit. They were starting to discolor and the teeth had grown even more. These were some gnarly looking fish. Little did I know we would catch some even worse off. He was really getting his casting down, and it showed as he hooked another rather quickly. However, this one still had its bright red colors. It would be a good one to get a picture of.
Oh, he's a nice one. Good color.
That is, wow.
That's a pretty one.
So I'm starting to... I knew it.
Now we gotta get you another one for the camera.
You could actually see the ones that were getting close to expiring just from the white discoloration. You'll notice some were still bright red, while others were nearly all white along their backs. Jim quickly hooked another and lost it as I tried netting it because it slipped by me into the quick water, before hooking into another fish that was looking like it was closer to the end of its life than the rest we'd caught.
I'm getting the hang of this. This is a female, and it's about ready to go. As you can tell by the color, still got a little fight in her.
It was crazy to see how these further along in the spawning process were not only losing their color, but even their fins were disintegrating while still alive. In fact, their scales were very dry now. The slime that normally coats them is totally absent. For example, compare the last one to Jim's next fish. This one still had plenty of bright red coloring.
This is fun. We're getting the hang of it. We're going to let him go. It's a beautiful color.
We both had a good time catching a handful of fish.
Oh, wow, you got it.
So that kind of brings me to the point here that this is all catch and release. So, typically these fish are coming out of Palisades Reservoir, and so typically you can keep 15 of them if you're on the reservoir. As soon as they enter any of the tributaries, they're completely off limits. It's only catch and release.
After Jim caught a couple more, I took a turn and caught one I'd been watching up at the top of the hole.
All right, so I was actually targeting this one, and I did foul hook it, but this one you could see the white back from quite a ways off. It's deteriorating and definitely on its last leg here. And it's interesting because even the skin gets really dry. It's not nearly as slimy anymore as the skin you know, is literally deteriorating while it's alive, and then they die. Everything just kind of falls apart on them. All right, so we've spent a couple hours on the river, and as you saw, Jim did very well. It didn't take him long at all to get it figured out, and he caught, I don't know, a half dozen fish. So that was pretty fun. I got a few too. What do you think about these kokanee, Jim?
It was fun. I've never done anything like that, and you know, it's just beautiful up here. It turned out to be a beautiful day. The colors are changing, and it was fun. It was a blast.
If you liked what you saw, please subscribe to the Jared Scott Outdoors YouTube channel.